Did a WNBA owner just get caught in the most embarrassing double standard of the season when Washington Mystics owner Sheila Johnson criticized Caitlin Clark's Time magazine cover? She claimed the entire league deserved recognition, not just one player, yet her actions tell a completely different story, and basketball fans everywhere are calling her out. If you've been following the WNBA this year, you know that the league has experienced unprecedented growth. Television ratings are soaring, ticket sales are breaking records, and social media engagement is through the roof. At the center of this explosion of interest is rookie sensation Caitlin Clark, whose transition from college superstar to professional athlete has captivated millions of new fans. But not everyone seemed happy about Clark's meteoric rise. When Time magazine named Clark their Athlete of the Year, Sheila Johnson, who owns the Washington Mystics franchise, appeared on CNN with some choice words about the recognition. She didn't stop there. Johnson continued, "It has taken the WNBA almost 28 years to get to the point where we are now, and this year something clicked with the WNBA, and it's because of the draft of the players that came in. It's just not Caitlin Clark. It's Angel Reese. We have so much talent out there that has been unrecognized, and I don't think we can just pin it on one player." Johnson then took her criticism a step further, introducing a racial element to the conversation. "I feel really bad because I've seen so many players of color that are equally as talented, and they never got the recognition that they should have." Her message was clear: recognizing Clark individually was unfair to other players, particularly players of color, and created division within the league. When you just keep singling out one player, it creates hard feelings, Johnson added. On the surface, these comments might seem like a reasonable call for collective recognition over individual accolades. After all, team sports are about more than just one player, and the WNBA does indeed have many talented athletes who deserve attention, but context matters, and Johnson's subsequent actions have exposed a startling inconsistency in her position. Let's look at what happened next. Time magazine recently announced A'ja Wilson as one of their Women of the Year, celebrating her extraordinary contributions to women's basketball. This prestigious individual recognition placed Wilson in the exact same position Clark had been in just months earlier, a singular player being honored for her achievements. If Johnson truly believed individual honors created division and that recognition should be spread across the entire league, this would have been the perfect moment to reassert those principles. The scenario was identical, a major publication singling out one WNBA player for individual recognition, yet Johnson said absolutely nothing. No CNN interview this time, no passionate plea about how Time should have recognized all the women of the WNBA instead of just Wilson. Her complete silence spoke volumes about what was really motivating her previous criticism of Clark's recognition. The contrast couldn't be more stark. When Clark received an individual honor, Johnson was quick to publicly minimize it and suggest it should have been a team award. When Wilson received a similar individual honor, Johnson had no problem with it whatsoever. This glaring inconsistency didn't go unnoticed within the league. WNBA player Lexi Brown publicly called out the double standard, posting, "Can we please stop taking steps backwards?" Her frustration reflected what many players and fans were thinking. If the concern was truly about fairness and team unity, why did that concern only apply when Clark was in the spotlight? But the hypocrisy doesn't end there. It gets even more obvious when you look at Johnson's actual business decisions regarding Caitlin Clark. In a move that directly contradicts her public statements, Johnson recently announced that the Washington Mystics would be relocating their home games against the Indiana Fever, Clark's team, to CFG Bank Arena in Baltimore. This wasn't just any venue change. It represented more than tripling their capacity, jumping from the entertainment and sports arena's modest 4,200 seats to a facility capable of holding nearly 14,000 fans. What makes this decision so revealing isn't just the change itself, it's the selective application. Johnson didn't announce a permanent move to a larger venue for all Mystics games. She didn't even select matchups against multiple top teams. No. This venue change targeted one specific team, the Indiana Fever, featuring the very player Johnson had publicly suggested wasn't solely responsible for the league's growing popularity. The financial implications are impossible to ignore, with almost 10,000 additional tickets available per game, all likely to be sold at premium prices given the demand for Clark's games. The revenue potential becomes staggering. A conservative estimate would suggest millions in additional ticket revenue from just these games alone, all driven by the drawing power of the very player Johnson had attempted to downplay. Basketball fans immediately recognized the contradiction. Social media erupted with call-outs highlighting the disconnect between Johnson's words and her actions. One fan didn't mince words. Wasn't this the same owner that diminished CeCe's impact and downplayed her? Now she's milking the ticket sales. Another pointedly asked, should the Mystics move all of their games there? Their owner didn't seem to want to give Caitlin any credit for the women's basketball movement, but yet she's good with extra profits from Fever games. The questions cut to the heart of the hypocrisy. As one fan succinctly put it, wait, why just the Fever games? Why not every game? Or are you choking on your words about the face of the league? These weren't just random internet critics, they were WNBA supporters who recognized the stark inconsistency between criticizing individual recognition while simultaneously cashing in on individual star power. To be fair, Johnson isn't alone in making venue adjustments for Fever games. Other WNBA teams have done the same thing. The difference is that those teams didn't first go on national television to minimize Clark's individual impact on the league. They didn't suggest that recognizing one player creates hard feelings. They simply acknowledged the reality. Caitlin Clark drives unprecedented interest in women's basketball. The numbers tell the story. When the Fever played against the Mystics last year, attendance averaged around 4,000 fans. But this year, with Clark on the roster, games are selling out everywhere she goes. Jersey sales for Clark have jumped by an astonishing 1,000%. Television ratings for Fever games have tripled. These aren't just impressive statistics, they're transformational figures that demonstrate how one player can elevate an entire league's profile and financial prospects. What's particularly noteworthy is how Clark herself has responded to all of this. Instead of firing back at Johnson or getting drawn into unnecessary drama, she's taken the high road. During her Time magazine interview, Clark emphasized mutual respect among players and dismissed any suggestions of jealousy within the league. No defensiveness, no counterattacks, just quiet confidence in her own journey. The contrast between Johnson's remarks and Clark's response speaks volumes. One sought to minimize an individual achievement and frame it as potentially harmful. The other showed grace under pressure and refused to be baited into division. This venue change by Johnson represents more than just a business decision. It's an inadvertent confession. When she claimed the entire WNBA deserved recognition, not just Clark, her words carried a certain weight, but actions ultimately reveal true beliefs, and her decision to specifically capitalize on Clark's drawing power through selective venue changes exposes the hollow nature of her previous statements. What does this say about the current state of WNBA leadership? Can league executives continue publicly downplaying individual stars while privately building business strategies entirely around them? The disconnect between public messaging and private decision-making creates a credibility problem that extends beyond just one owner. One of the most interesting aspects of this situation is how it reveals a fundamental misunderstanding about star power in sports. Throughout sports history, individual stars have been crucial to growing leagues and attracting new fans. Michael Jordan transformed the NBA into a global phenomenon. Serena Williams made millions care about tennis who never followed the sport before. Tom Brady drove NFL ratings for 2 decades. These stars didn't diminish their sports, They elevated them. Their individual brilliance brought in new viewers, who then discovered other great players and developed deeper appreciation for the game as a whole. The same dynamic is happening with Clark in the WNBA. What basketball analysts have been saying all along is now proven by these events. Johnson's comments didn't just undermine Clark's individual achievements. They created an unnecessary division in a league that should be celebrating its rising stars. The hypocrisy is painfully obvious when we look at the complete picture. There's also something deeply ironic about Johnson's criticism of Clark's recognition. By arguing that Clark was receiving too much individual attention, Johnson inadvertently gave her even more attention. By suggesting that Clark's time cover would create hard feelings among players, she herself was creating those hard feelings through her public comments. Beyond the hypocrisy of her statements versus her actions, there's a larger question about Johnson's leadership approach. As a team owner, her primary responsibility should be growing the game and maximizing opportunities for her players and franchise. Yet by publicly criticizing the very phenomenon that's driving unprecedented growth for the league, she's working against her own interests and those of her players. This isn't to say that Johnson's initial point about recognizing all the talent in the WNBA is without merit. The league does have many extraordinary players who deserve attention. Stars like A'ja Wilson, Breanna Stewart, Alyssa Thomas, Angel Reese, Sabrina Ionescu, and many others are world-class athletes performing at the highest level, but recognizing Clark's unique impact on league attendance and viewership doesn't diminish those other players. It creates more opportunities for fans to discover them. That's the part Johnson seems to be missing. Clark isn't taking the spotlight away from other players. She's making the spotlight bigger for everyone. Her games consistently draw the largest audiences in WNBA history, which means more people are watching all the players on the court, not just her. Her social media presence has driven millions of new followers to WNBA accounts, increasing visibility for the entire league. Perhaps the most telling aspect of this situation is how other WNBA players are responding to Clark, compared to how some owners and executives are reacting. While there have been occasional tensions on the court, as there are in any competitive sport, many WNBA veterans have embraced Clark and recognized the positive impact she's having on the league. WNBA legend Sue Bird, for example, has spoken positively about Clark's impact on the game. Current stars like Ionescu have formed friendships with Clark, rather than seeing her as a threat. The players who actually share the court with Clark seem to understand what some executives don't. Her success is good for everyone in women's basketball. The dynamic playing out with Johnson and Clark reflects a broader challenge in women's sports. For decades, women's leagues have fought for attention, respect, and financial support. Now that the WNBA is experiencing unprecedented growth, some of its leaders seem uncomfortable with the very success they've been working toward. There's almost a sense of resentment that the breakthrough is happening now with this particular player, rather than years ago with previous stars. That sentiment, while perhaps understandable on a human level, is counterproductive for the growth of the sport. The future of the WNBA doesn't depend on diminishing individual excellence, but embracing it. As analysts have pointed out, stars like Clark elevate the entire league rather than detracting from it. What's clear is that the disconnect between Johnson's public statements and her business decisions has damaged her credibility with fans and players alike. By criticizing Clark's individual recognition while simultaneously capitalizing on her star power, Johnson has painted herself into an uncomfortable corner where her words and actions are in direct conflict. The fact that Johnson specifically moved games against Clark's team to a larger venue while remaining silent about Wilson's time recognition exposes the real issue. This was never about principles. It was never about team recognition versus individual accolades. If it had been, Johnson would have been consistent in her statements regardless of which player was being recognized. Instead, the selective nature of her criticism reveals something else at play. Whether it's personal dislike, resentment over attention, or discomfort with the changing dynamics of the league. Johnson's inconsistency suggests her initial criticism wasn't based on the principled stance she presented. What's most unfortunate about this situation is that it creates unnecessary division at a time when women's basketball should be united in celebration. The WNBA is experiencing a moment that many thought would never come. Genuine public interest, mainstream media coverage, and growing financial success. This should be a time of unity and celebration for everyone who cares about women's basketball. Instead, statements like Johnson's, followed by contradictory actions, create friction and undermine the positive momentum the league is experiencing. They send mixed messages to fans, players, and sponsors about what the WNBA values and where it's headed. The contradiction between public statements and private business decisions exposes the real issue. When a star drives growth, that's a collective win for women's basketball. Maybe that's what scares some executives the most, admitting they need their stars as much as their stars need the league. For the WNBA as a whole, the path forward is clear. Embrace the stars who drive interest in the game while using that platform to showcase all the incredible talent the league has to offer. Recognize individual excellence while celebrating team achievements. Acknowledge the pioneers who built the foundation while welcoming the newcomers who are helping to complete the structure. In other words, it's not Caitlin Clark or the rest of the WNBA. It's Caitlin Clark and the rest of the WNBA working together to grow the game to unprecedented heights. The numbers don't lie. Caitlin Clark is transforming the WNBA, and Sheila Johnson's actions prove it, no matter what she says publicly. What's your take on this situation? Do you think Johnson's venue change exposes her true feelings? Drop your thoughts below, and tap that subscribe button for more unfiltered basketball truth bombs you won't get anywhere else.